ito ay discuss natin today is yung mismong um, mga spacecraft and aircraft sensors na present sa mga vehicles natin. So, kita naman yung PowerPoint, no? Visible naman. Okay, thanks. So, not only we discuss about this classification, but also is real-life application. So, unang-una na nga din is itong sa spacecraft muna kasi dapat nga aircraft eh. Pero mas gusto ko kasi itong spacecraft kasi ano. So, sa spacecraft, very important siya kasi unang-una, very dependent yung mga spacecraft natin sa environment. Lalong-lalo na kapag nasa labas ng space. Kasi sa space, walang air. So, how we're supposed to detect something that is not there? Well, wala naman talagang sensor ng air sa mga spacecraft. But, ano yung ibang stimulus na pwede natin i-measure? Una, sun. Yung temperature. Yung radiation, pangalawa, radiation. Kung gaano excite yung mga particles natin. Puwede rin na pressure or force galing sa mga asteroids or pressure naman galing sa loob, no? So, yung mga bagay na yun, we are very reliant sa mga sensor para lang makakuha ng ganoong data or measurement dun sa environment natin kasi hindi tayo familiar sa environment natin sa space. So, very meticulous yung paggagawa ng sensors to the point na meron silang mga backup sensors or parang contingency plan para lang pag nagkaroon ng failure sa isa, may kapalit silang isa. Ano? Kaya minsan kung makikita nyo, sobrang komplikado ng mga sensors sa space kasi they are designed in order to prevent failure para maging reliable sila in the first place. So, kagaya ng sabi ko, sensors are working like a sense or organ na ginagamit natin for sense, which is yung mata, yung bibig, yung ilong, yung tenga, yung skin. So lahat ng yan, um, we are translating it to electronic devices in forms of sensors para lang makagather tayo ng information. Kasi mahirap gumalaw or mahirap mag-operate kapag hindi mo alam yung lugar na ginagalaw mo kung wala kang data about your surrounding. So, sa sensors natin, they are used typically based on their mission objectives. So, nakadepende sa mismong goal ng spacecraft kung ano mga sensors ang ilalagay natin dyan. Pwedeng data collection, navigation and attitude control, comms, environmental monitoring, gamit sa PhilScience, yan, safety and protection, hindi ko alam kung sa missiles, other missions such as planetary exploration, Earth observation, yan, PhilScience din Earth observation. Though sa planetary exploration, kung alam mo yung Perseverance saka yung isa pang rover ng NASA. Di ko tanda yung isang pangalan pero yung isa ay Perseverance. They are packed with sensors na kaya nilang mag-measure ng or mag-pick up ng mga specimen galing sa ibang planeta or tinatawag natin din na probing. Now, ano yung isang prime example? Para sa akin, ito yung pinakatumatak sa akin kasi sobrang unique nung kanyang mission objective, which is the Osiris-Rex. Dati kasi guys, matagal na naman 'to. I mean, yung kaya ko 'to na ano, nasabi na parang unique and interesting. Kami kasi dati pinaggawa kami ng mission profile kung saan we are free to do anything basta meron kaming plan about how we will use our aerospace vehicles. Ngayon, napili namin nung time na yon, may balita na meron daw isang asteroid na pwedeng tumama sa mundo. Kung alam niyo yung ano, I think 4Y4 ata, yun yung pangalan. Di ko exactly tanda, pero may 4 tsaka may Y ata yun. Yung asteroid na yun, na para daw may chance na tumama sa planet Earth. Kung di niyo natatandaan, search na lang sa Google, lalabas naman yun for sure. Way back 2023 or 2024, I think 2024 kung naman nagkakamali. So, gumawa kami ng parang mission plan kung paano namin ibubuuin yung isang spacecraft na ang goal is ma-intercept or pag-aralan din in a separate mission yung asteroid na yun or pwedeng i-deviate yung asteroid, no? So dito parang malapit, ito yung pinagkuhanan namin inspiration, kumbaga, itong existing na spacecraft na to, which is the OSIRIS-REx. So yung OSIRIS-REx, also known as the Origin Spectral Interpretation Resource Identification Security Regulate Explorer, no, mouthful siya pero ano lang, parang feel ko pinilit lang yan para maging ano, maging Rex or maging OSIRIS-REx. Pinaka-goal nitong ano na to, pinaka-goal na tong spacecraft nito is noon i-collect and study yung mga specimen na meron sa asteroid Bennu. So yung Bennu, medyo malapit siya sa solar pero not really. Hindi ko alam kung siya may ano, may possibility na tumama pero ang alam ko nag-flyby lang siya kung ano nagkakamali. Ang goal nitong spacecraft nito is unang-una mag-collect nga and mag-study nung sample sa asteroid Bennu. So ang mga sensor na meron siya, syempre camera, laser altimeter kung siya ay malapit na dun sa asteroid. So spectrometers, surface composition, topography, and temperature sensors. So lahat ng yun, kasya dito sa spacecraft natin, sa maliit na spacecraft na yan. And I'm sure ano naman, naging successful naman sila kasi nasa history din siya ng mga previous, kumbaga previous spacecraft that studies asteroid containing different instrumentation or instruments rather, instruments at saka sensors. Tapos, yun lang, na-share ko lang naman. So, proceed na tayo sa mga examples ng ating spacecraft sensors. And ang unang-una na nga doon, gamit na gamit, is gyroscopes. So, not technically they are sensor, but they are used to calculate or sense in a sense yung attitude ng isang spacecraft. Kung familiar kayo sa isang camera equipment na gimbal, 'di ba gimbals are used in order to stabilize a camera. So, nagwo-work yung gyroscope in the same manner, same composition dun sa gimbal natin. So, ang meron siya yung nako-connect sa spacecraft which is itong outer ring and then yung inner ring siya yung suspended in a sense. Favorite word. In a sense, yung um, pinagit ng ano natin kung saan kapag nag-rotate yung spacecraft, nag-ano lang, stay in place lang yung gitna niya. So yung gitnang yon, gitnang part na yan, pwede niyang i-measure yung angular displacement as well as angular velocity and angular uh, rate of angular change ng spacecraft natin. Typically in radians per second or in degree per second. So once na magkaroon ng movement, syempre since suspended lang siya or nasa gitna lang at kumbaga nakatigil lang, pwede niyang i-calculate yung pagbabago ng movement ng outer ring niya on all direction to XYZ. I mean all axis XYZ. And pwede niyang i-compute yun in order to determine their attitude. And then afterwards, send yun sa ano natin, isend sa controller natin para i-regulate or i-maintain yung ating attitude. So yun yung isa sa pinaka gamit na gamit or hindi mawawala sa ating mga satellites or sa mga spacecraft natin. Though may mga ano na siya, may mga kumbaga modern version ngayon such as CMGs, control moment gyros. Pero ito rin naman yun. Gyro din naman yung pinaka-principle. No. Now second, accelerometer. So ang ano dito, ang mine-measure dito, syempre acceleration of change in velocity with respect to time. But the question is how? How are they measuring something that is on space? Kasi mine-measure natin ang ating um, mga ano natin through change in, 'di ba? Change in position, tapos change in uh, velocity, tsaka natin makakompute ng accelerometer. So, dun sa mga accelerometer sa sasakyan, I think nag-work naman siya on the same way dito sa ating spacecraft to which meron tayong tinatawag na proof mass. Kung hindi nyo alam yung proof mass, try natin i-draw. So, for example, meron ka dito accelerometer. Tapos, meron ka ditong proof mass na sa gitna. Ngayon, yung proof mass na yan, connected dyan sa mga spring na ginagawang suspended or nag-i-induce ng suspension dun sa ano natin. So, for example, try natin galawin tong hole na to, matik mag-stay lang yan sa gitna. No? Or, delay yung kanyang movement. So, yung movement na yun, naka-connect yun dito sa parang isa pang compartment dito. Tapos ito, connected pa sa isang measuring tool. So, ang nangyayari dyan, kapag gumagalaw itong spring with respect to this point, kasi nga suspended yung ano, di ba? Suspended itong body, tapos independent tong proof mass dun sa galaw ng body natin. Hindi sila nagsasabay ng frequency, pero once na gumalaw tong labas, tapos nagsuspend itong ano, mame-measure ni itong probing kineme na to na merong displacement dito sa part na to. So, yung displacement na yun, syempre, meron siyang velocity. So, once na malaman niya yun, or once na ma-measure niya yung velocity na yun, or change in velocity, i-compute yun sa overall time from point 1 or velocity 1 to velocity 2, then divide yun sa time from velocity 1 to 2. Tapos, makukuha mo na yung acceleration. No? So, meters per second squared or foot per second squared. Now, sa spacecraft mahalaga din 'yun of course kasi minsan lalong-lalo sa mga ano, sa mga nagfa-flyby, bigla-biglang bumibilis yung or bigla-bigla lumalakas yung pull ng gravity. So kailangan din nating bantayan yung acceleration ng isang spacecraft lalong-lalo na kapag malapit tayo sa mga planets or any celestial bodies. Kasi 'di ba, any according to universal law of gravitation, any object can attract other object if in vacuum or in space. So, sa paglaki ng isang um, planet or parang body, sa paglakas ng gravitational pull niya from another or to another. So, yun yung goal or parang pinaka um, objective ng ating accelerometer. No? So, una natin kanina ay gyro, then accelerometer. Then, para kumumpleto sa the big three, meron tayong tinatawag na magnetometer. So the magnetometer from the name itself is used to measure magnetic fields. Now, matatanong nyo ako, bakit sir sobrang layo? Kasi kung i-search nyo yung magnetometer sa mga spacecraft, lahat sila naka-gantong style. May isang mahabang structure kung saan suspended or saan naka-attach rather yung ating magnetometer. Bakit kaya? Kasi mga electronic components natin, especially if it's AC, pero most of the time DC naman yan, ay tawag dito, nagke-create sila ng magnetic field. Although sometimes it's minuscule or sobrang liit lang naman niya, pwede pa rin yung makaapekto sa measurement ng ating magnetometer. Kaya sobrang layo ng attachment niya. Kasi para hindi ma-influensyahan nung mga electronics natin. So that's why ganito yung tsura, no? They are built pa naman in order to have high sensitivity para dun sa mga changes ng magnetic field. So, dapat malayo talaga. So, ito yung counterpart niya, which is BMM150, 3-axis magnetometer. So, pwede na rin niyang pwede rin niyang measure yung magnetic field at 3 axis or 3 directions. Kaya nga siya 3-axis magnetometer. So, I think that's the big three. So, kapag pinagsama-sama natin yung gyro, accelerometer, tsaka yung magnetometer, mabubuo natin itong tinatawag natin na inertial moment measurement unit or IMU. Wait lang ah. So, IMU or inertial measurement unit is just a combination of those three na na-discuss ko kanina, the gyro, the magneto, tsaka accelerom. Although sometimes kahit gyro tsaka accelerometer, okay na yun, palag na yun. Pero para mas kompleto lang yung ating IMU or mame-measure natin, sinasama natin sa magnetometer. Kung hindi nyo alam, yung mga phones natin, they are made of, meron silang IMU. So, kaya minsan, pwede nyo yung gamitin yung ating phone for compass. Kung naabutan nyo, may compass pa ba ngayon sa phone? Kung alam nyo na, or kung naka-discover kayo ng compass sa phone yun, dahil yun sa magnetometer. And, syempre, sa gamit nating app, which is yung maps, kapag naliligaw tayo, or Waze, pwede rin yun. Kasi kaya niyang itak yung orientation, um, yun nga, velocity, acceleration, kung paano tayo gagalaw, etc. Syempre with the help of GPS pa rin naman din. So, yung IMU natin, pwede siyang ano, hindi pala pwede, standalone talaga siya, standalone system, kung saan hindi siya nagre-rely on other systems such as yung GPS nga. Pero, minsan pwede nilang gamitin both of the information from the IMU tsaka GPS para makapag-produce ng mas ano, meaningful na data. So, sabi dito, yun nga, pwede niya i-measure yung linear acceleration, angular velocity from gyro, and sometimes magnetic field from magnetometer, and track the motion and orientation of an object. So, para mas maano siya, ma-visualize or ma-appreciate, meron ako dito ipapanood sa inyo na video presentation about IMU. So, click ko lang to, then share ko yung video. Yan. Sana may
Head growth. Unleash the Ascenda effect.
Meet Astra, your AI sourcing assistant. Describe what
May audio naman po, no? Narinig yung ads kanina. Sige.
In this video, we'll provide a basic overview of inertial measurement units, or IMUs. We'll discuss the different sensors used in an IMU and explore how these sensors can be combined in a process called sensor fusion. Let's start with a quick demonstration. Here we have a Fidget IMU that has sensor fusion built in. As we move the IMU, data from the onboard sensors is collected and sensor fusion algorithms are applied. The result is sent over USB to the Unity program, and the spaceship reflects that movement. Now that we have an idea of what an IMU can do, let's dive into the different sensors that make an IMU. There are three types of motion sensors commonly used in smartphones and smartwatches: accelerometers, gyroscopes, and magnetometers. The combination of these three sensors is called an IMU, an inertial measurement unit. The information from these sensors is combined with sophisticated math to provide handy features like screen orientation, heading, meaning which way the device is facing, and gesture detection. These sensors are not new, they're older than computers. Gyroscopes, as a mechanical device, have been a safety-critical instrument in airplanes for over 100 years. Accelerometers were originally used to record the shaking of earthquakes. And obviously, compasses are thousands of years old as a navigation tool for ships. What has changed in the last 30 years? The technologies developed for making computer chips have been brought to bear on sensors, and these specific sensors have gotten extremely small and extremely economical. For a programmer, the most obvious way to interact with these sensors is to write an app for a phone. The phone has the sensors built in, and your software can get the data. At Fidgets, we design and manufacture a variety of motion sensors useful when higher accuracy is needed, or you just don't want to deal with a phone. Our motion sensors are fast, accurate, and work with all major operating systems and programming languages. Pre-built software for testing and visualization is available. Next, we'll take a look at each individual sensor, starting with accelerometers. An accelerometer is a device that makes very precise measurements of acceleration. We also experience acceleration. As I sit on this chair, gravity is evenly pulling my body down, and the chair pushes back up. This is 1g of acceleration, and the accelerometer on the desk beside me reports 1g. If you jump out of an airplane, you're free falling, feeling weightless. The accelerometer in your phone will report 0g, no acceleration. Go for a ride in a sports car, you feel gravity pulling you down into the seat and acceleration pushing you back into the seat. An accelerometer will register both of these accelerations added together. Gyroscopes, on the other hand, sense rotation. We can also sense rotation. If we are blindfolded and spun on a chair, this rotation is obvious. A gyroscope is far better at measuring rotation than we are, with the added benefit that it doesn't get sick. A magnetometer is a generic term for a sensor that measures magnetic fields. A compass is just a specific use of a magnetometer for figuring out direction by measuring the magnetic field of the Earth. Each of these sensors has serious issues. These issues can be overcome by combining them in a process called sensor fusion. This is usually used to calculate which way the phone is pointing. The accelerometer is easy to confuse with shaky motion, but if we stop moving it around for a second, it knows which way is up. The gyroscope over minutes and hours will eventually lose its pointing accuracy, but it's super smooth and accurate on the scale of seconds. Compasses are really easy to interfere with, but if the interference settles down for a second, the compass can immediately identify which way is north. If this has piqued your interest, check out our Introduction to Fidget Spatials video.
Pag ganitong sebo? Ay, sabon? Kuskus? Sabon ulit!
Ubos itong bote mo. Mag-Joyce Wakto. 3 times stronger power. Isang patak, tanggal ang matinding sebo. Linis! Joyce Wakto. 3 times stronger power.
One of the most important sensor systems on board the quadcopter flight controller I'm currently developing is the inertial measurement unit.
Okay. So, balik tayo dun sa PowerPoint. So, kung nakita nyo sa ating IMU, yun nga, sabi ko kanina, it's a combination of 3 separate sensors, which is the accelerometer, gyro, tsaka yung magnetometer. So, ito yung isa sa application niya, yung pag-determine nga ng attitude and orientation, as well as heading, etc. So, kung makikita nyo, kaya niya i-replicate, or kaya niyang kunin yung current orientation niya. Tapos i-transfer yun almost instantly sa natin, sa controller natin or processor. So, isa sa mga pinaka maganda application niya is yun, sa spacecraft, aircraft. Yan, compass na sinasabi ko kanina, sa maps, sa phones natin. Tapos, ginagamit nga siya before as seismograph kasi kaya niya nga i-determine yung yung orientation and in almost very accurate points or parang increment. So, yun dati sobrang laki niya, tapos ngayon nasa piso na lang yung sukat niya. So, kung mag-order kayo ng IMU, yan, pwede nyong makita na sobrang liit lang niya today. Yun lang, accelerometers na discuss na naman natin yan. Gyro din. Rotational, angular displacement. Accelerometers, yan. Tapos, yun, may tinatawag tayong sensor fusion, which is combination ng naman ng sensors, from the name itself, fusion. So, pinagsasama natin yung dalawang set or dalawang character or example or classification ng sensor. Yan. And balik tayo sa ating PowerPoint presentation. A minute lang. Yan. So, makita na natin kung anong ibig sabihin ng IMU. Proceed tayo sa other examples ng aircraft or spacecraft sensors. So, isa sa mga unique din na nakita kong sensors spacecraft is yung tinatawag natin star tracker tsaka sun sensor or sun tracker. Pwede rin yan. Almost synonymous lang naman yan sa tawag. It's either sun sensor, sun tracker, star sensor. Kasi, ang ginagawa nito is actually from the name itself is tinatandaan niya kung saang part nandoon yung mga stars natin. Through what? Through constellations. Kasi meron na naman tayong information or catalog ng mga constellations or ng mga stars kung saan sila nakalagay or saan sila situated. So, for example, yung North Star, alam natin, lagi nasa North yan. So, ang ginagawa dito sa Star Tracker, meron siyang camera, saka Star Catalog. Or yung catalog kung saan nandun lahat ng information about the position of every star. So, ang ginagawa niya, magte-take siya ng picture, iraran dun sa controller, sa comparator kung siya ay merong katulad na catalog. Tapos dun niya ma-determine kung ano kanyang orientation, kung saan siya nakaharap na constellation or whatsoever. So, isa to sa pinakamagandang sensor especially kapag malayo na or outside na ng solar system or outside ng uh, terrestrial planets natin or ng mga terrestrial planets natin outside ng asteroid belt. So, para kasi alam natin kung saan tayo nakaharap, saan tayo patungo. Hindi tayo parang ligaw na batang naghahanap ng nanay niya sa palengke or sa SM. So, ibig sabihin nun, malaking tulong to kapag malayo. Kasi kung kaya mo is i-track yung star natin, tapos um, meron kang proper na actuator or thruster, kaya mo mag-travel ng interstellar or outside ng which is isa sa prime example is yung sa voyage natin. Although di ko alam kung siya may star tracker or what. Pero ang alam ko, isa yun sa pinaka maganda example ng interstellar spacecraft. Then, kung meron tayong star tracker, syempre di mawawala yung sun sensor natin or sun tracker natin. So, yung sun sensor natin is from the name itself, instead na star, sun naman. The question is, paano niya mini-measure, paano niya determine yung position natin based doon sa position ng sun? Una, alam natin na ang sun ay merong certain energy na ini-emit, ine-emit, emit kapag tayo ay nakatutok sa sun or directly facing the sun. Now, kapag nabawasan yun, ng kahit konting-konti lang, ibig sabihin yung sensor natin is tumagilid ng konti. Meaning, orientation has changed. So, nakadepende sa energy na mare-receive na ang niyang sun sensor natin yung orientation ng spacecraft. So, kapag siya ay maliit lang or nabawasan compared dun sa naunang nakatutok, ibig sabihin nun, nagkaroon ng deviation sa position, orientation ating spacecraft. So, yun yung pagkakaiba ng dalawa. Yung isa may catalog, yung isa naman nakadepende sa energy or solar power generation ng sun. Tapos, help the spacecraft orient itself for solar power generation yun. Minsan kasi ginagamit din to para ma-maintain yung position ng solar arrays natin sa sun or solar panels natin sa sun para directly siya tutok or na-harvest natin yung sun. Ang problema lang dito, I think, solar winds and yung solar flares pag masyado tayo malapit. Pero di naman siya ganun ginagamit pag sobrang lapit sa sun. So, yun. Next naman natin, kung meron tayong sun sensor or tracker, meron din tayong thermal sensor. Kumbaga, nag-a-act siya as ano ba yan? Yung pang-sense ng temperature thermometer, no? Pero more sophisticated thermometer kasi meron siyang direct measurement ng outside temperature. Through, I think, kung hindi ako nagkakamali, IR, infrared. Kung di man ganun, di syempre yung mga normal na sensor ng temperature. So, sabi dito, these sensors monitor the temperature variations on the spatial surface within its components to ensure that critical systems stay within their operational limits. Bakit natin ginagawa? Syempre, para ma-make sure na nasa optimal condition yung electronics, yung components natin. Kasi meron silang operational conditions or manual. Dapat gantong temp lang. Kasi alam niyo naman, pag masyadong mainit, nagkakaroon ng damage. Or, unang nangyayari is, minsan tumataas yung resistance ng mga natin, mga wires natin. So, kailangan ma-maintain din natin. And syempre, paano natin ma-maintain kung di natin siya i-measure? Ang ginagamit dun is thermal sensors. Katulad nitong nasa kaliwa natin. So, yung malaki, ginagamit sa satellite. And then, itong maliit, baka hindi nyo lang nakikita, yung 3-legged na TMP na yan, ay ginagamit for temperature sensing sa ating mga electronics, sa mga prototype. Next naman natin, kung meron tayong thermal, syempre meron din tayong radiation, no? So, di lang natin mini-measure yung temperature but also how excited yung mga particles na nag-heat dun sa or tumatama dun sa ating spacecraft. Yan ay ginamit noon sa Artemis, kung familiar kayo sa Artemis, ginamit siya para ma-evade in a sense or para ma-detect kung okay pa ba yung radiation ng spacecraft. Kasi kapag nasa labas ka ng space or nasa labas ka ng atmosphere natin, you're very prone to radiation. Meron silang procedure sa pagkakaalam ko kapag nag-exceed yung radiation level ng spacecraft kung saan magtatago sila doon sa bunker. Biruin mo yung compartment nila doon sa crew module nila. Sobrang liit na tapos nagawan pa nila ng parang bunker doon sa baba. Well, yun naman ay for for contingency lang in case ang na magkaroon ng high levels of radiation. Pero syempre, we cannot be too sure sa space kasi space is scary, no? Wala tayong alam dyan, hindi nga tayo makahinga sa space eh. Tapos, ang ginagamit dun, syempre, yung radiation sensors. Ang ano dyan, ang mechanism, paano siya gumagana, meron tayong mga tinatawag na telescope. Kung saan yung mga telescope na yun, pwede niyang i-detect or kaya niyang i-detect yung kahit sobrang liit na excitement or radiation nga ng mga particles natin. So kung makikita niyo dito sa kanan natin, yung malaki sa likod, ang tawag diyan is the Energetic Particle Telescope or yung EPT. Now, ang EPT, prime example ng radiation detector kasi kaya niyang i-detect yung energy, yung charge, and the angle itself, kahit yung angle na, ng any incoming charge particles from a broad range of energy across a wide 50-degree field of view. So anything inside those 50-degree field of view, kaya niyang i-measure from low to high charge yung ating mga particles, yung ating mga radiated particles. So, meron siyang dalawang section, one for low and one for high. Siyempre, kapag ang ginamit mo yung isa lang, mahihirapan ka kasi masyadong mataas yung range na pwede mong i-process. So, mataas yung kailangan mo i-compare. So, ang ginawa nila, pinag-separate nila, one for low and one for high. Kapag siguro nag-exceed ng low, tsaka sila magpo-proceed to high. Pero yung una nilang ginagamit, I think, is yung for low. Hindi siya simultaneous. Kasi pag simultaneous, ubos yan sa power required, or power supply. Then, sunod naman natin is seismometers. Yung seismometers, ginagamit siya, syempre, sa pag-detect ng any vibration sa loob ng sa loob ng spacecraft natin. Kung siya ba ay mag-exceed na ng vibration ng ating aircraft or ng ating spacecraft. Tapos, ang seismometers natin, typically ginagamit yan sa ground, di ba? Pero sa satellite, they are actually sometimes suspended. Kung makita niyo yung part na yan, yung nasa ilalim, meron silang dumping system kung saan kailangan yung ma-measure na syempre parang katulad ng kanina sa accelerometer pero more sophisticated on detecting minor movement from the spacecraft itself. So kailangan siya kasi kunwari kasi sa space, 'di ba, zero gravity. Paano mararamdaman yung lindol kung di ka naman nakatapak dun sa mismong surface? So mahirap siya i-detect kasi minsan hindi naman sa lahat ng oras merong parang induced gravity. 'Di ba? Nagkakaroon lang ng induced gravity kapag merong torque dun sa loob. Kumbaga nagpapaikot-ikot or rotation yung natin. Paano sa ibang part? Hindi naman sila palaging nagro-rotate para mag-produce ng torque. So kailangan nila ng seismograph para malaman kung meron bang kahit konting movement dun sa nila, sa surface nila. So lahat yan ay recorded all throughout the mission kung ano nakakamali dun sa logbook nila. Then syempre, yan dust detectors. Nasa na tayo, medyo niche na na sensors, kumbaga specific na na application. So unang-una dito is yung dust. Kailangan yan sa mga rovers sa ibang planeta, sa Perseverance, etc. Kasi may mga planets, terrestrial planets, to be exact, na sobrang daming dust dun sa surface nila. And once na tamaan yun ng wind, yun, mapupunta sa sensor, magiging mababa yung mababa yung para measurement ng or accuracy ng mga measurement ng sensors. So kaya kailangan natin ma-measure yung level of dust sa ating So according or based dun sa measurement, pwede tayong mag-employ ng mga dust mitigating actions such as fans, etc. So meron na atang parang thesis about dust mitigation technique. Ewan ko lang kung nagamit nila itong sensor. I think hindi. Kasi more on design sila. So, yun, dust sensor. Next is gas particles or gas and particle analyzers. Kung tawag dito, kung aware kayo dun sa mga websites kung saan name-measure nila yung air quality ng bawat bayan or barangay sa Pilipinas, typically gumagamit sila ng mga gantong sensor. But on lower level, syempre lower level lang naman doon concentrated yung mga gas and particles natin kaya doon sila mas kailangan gamitin. Pero sa mga spacecraft natin, ginagamit din siya lalong-lalo na kapag gusto nating i-maintain yung air quality sa loob ng station natin. So for example, carbon, pwede niya i-detect. Smoke, pwede. Smoke detector. MQ2, I think, VCO2, kung di man VCO2, baka carbon, pwede rin yung pwede carbon monoxide, pwede rin yun. So marami siyang application, marami din siyang iba't ibang types ng gas and particle analysis. Hindi lang MQ2, yung nakikita niyo dito sa natin. Marami siyang type, pwede may smoke, carbon ngayon. So minsan, or most of the time, yung mga sensor na to, kaya niyang i-measure yung wide ray or wide array of different particles and gas. So nakadepende yun sa datasheet or parang specific specification nung mismong sensor natin. Nakalagay naman doon kung ano mga particles or gas yung kaya niyang i-analyze. So kapag gagawa kayo ng prototype, make sure na basahin yun kasi baka mamaya yung ma-measure natin, i-assume yun na siya ay carbon na. So yun. Sabi dito, composition properties, phase calculus measures. Yun, properties din ng gases. And then, syempre, yung pinakamalaga sa lahat, the goat of all the sensors, which is the optical sensors and cameras. So, ito yung pinakagamit, syempre, lalong-lalo na sa Earth observation, lalong-lalo na sa PhilSA, sa Philippine Space Agency. They're very dependent sa mga optical sensors and cameras na on board dun sa satellite natin. Kasi kung wala yan, anong gagawin natin dun sa taas? Ang goal naman natin ni Earth observation. So, kailangan natin ng high fidelity or high spec na mga sensors, optical sensors or cameras para maging significant or maging kapaki-pakinabang yung ma-capture natin na message. So, alam niyo naman how camera works. They're very dependent on the light that is reflected back from the surface. And then, once na ma-reflect na yun, ma-receive nung camera, then yun ipaprocess na. Now, kung familiar kayo sa remote sensing, I think merong mga student dito that they're very interested in remote sensing or pagpaprocess ng mga satellite data or images na nakukuha natin from satellites. So, kung di nyo alam, every object sa surface ng Earth or ng planet Earth is nagre-reflect ng certain amount, certain type ng electromagnetic wave or electromagnetic energy. So, yung wave na yun, nagkakaiba-iba kung ikaw ay grass, kung ikaw ay tubig, or land. So, lahat ng yun, may kani-kanilang ina-absorb. Parang lang, sa kulay lang. May ina-absorb silang kulay, tapos may na-reflect silang kulay. Kaya nga may kulay. So, the same principle works dito sa mga optical sensors. Hindi naman natin siya, kumbaga, pwedeng mag-rely na lang sa kulay itself, sa visible light. Kailangan natin ng mas concrete at mas kumbaga ay mas maganda na parang measurement or parang basis kung ano ba yung magiging characteristic ng bagay na to. And yun yung EM waves. So sa amin dati, gumawa kami ng parang drought prediction website or parang model which is powered by machine learning. To which ginamit namin yung mga satellite data from Sentinel and Landsat. Kung saan kinompute namin kung ano yung mga bands kasi ang tawag dun kung ano yung mga EM waves. Bands kung saan yung kunwari, yung tubig, paano namin i-measure? Kasi yung bands na yun, kailangan mo siya i-calculate. Tapos kapag kinalculate mo pa, dun mo pa makukuha yung mismong tinatawag na indices. For example, NDMI or NDVI, Vegetation Index. sa index na yon, sa formula na yon, once na ma-compute mo yun from the EM waves, ay makukuha mo yung mga parts ng picture or ng data kung saan concentrated yung vegetation or yung color greens na tinatawag namin. So, medyo mahirap siya i-process kung wala kang background sa remote sensing, pero may mga tutorial naman and ano. So, dun sa mga ano, pwede siyang tingnan dun sa remote sensing tutorials. Pero more on ano naman siya kumbaga ay wide range naman yung application ng satellite data. Hindi lang sa sa remote sensing or hindi lang sa pag-process ng vegetation. Marami rin pwede rin sa sa urbanization, pwede rin sa drought, yun nga, yung ginawa namin. Ah, Tapos, sa temperature yun, pwede rin. So, mga ganun bagay ba? And they're all possible kasi meron tayong mga optical sensors or cameras. No, dami sinabi. Okay. So, ito yung isang example kung paano ba natin nagagamit yung raw satellite captures or data natin into actionable Earth intelligence. Paano ba natin siya pinaprocess in the first place from raw data to up until the maps that we produce today in order to help people get informed about their situation. So, sa YouTube ulit ito. Share ko lang ulit. Loading lang. Wait lang. Bagal lang net. Wait, may nag-raise. I can't share screen. Baka kailangan mo na mag-loading bago share. Ulit. Wait lang ha. Wait lang, ayaw mag-loading. Ang tagal mag-loading. Paniger. Third try. Wala ayaw talaga. Sayang, ganda pa naman ng video. Pero proceed tayo din sa PowerPoint natin. Okay. So, tapos na tayo sa spacecraft. Yun na yan na lang ha. Parang pahapyaw lang dun sa mga common na ginagamit sa spacecraft. Pero, it is not only limited to those sensors. Marami pa kayong pwedeng ma-discover na sensor. Alam ko marami pa kayo na idagdag dun sa inyong laboratory activity. Okay lang sa akin kahit wala sa discussion natin ngayon. Basta kapag chinek ko, sensible na or may makita akong parang example about that type of sensor ha. So, proceed tayo sa aircraft. No? Sa aircraft, I think dito kayo pinaka-familiar kasi most of the discussions sa ating curriculum or sa ating previous studies, mga lectures natin is mostly nadidiscuss na natin before yung mga sensors na to. Unang-una nga dun is yung pitot-static system. Pero dito muna tayo sa aircraft sensors. Sa aircraft sensors, meron tayong tawag dito, main objective just to check the surrounding and at mostly attitude, tsaka ano lang naman 'to, attitude and, heading determination. Yeah, yun lang. Pero, may iba pa siyang, usage such as flight parameters monitoring, yan, altitude, airspeed, attitude orientation, navigation and positioning, GPS, INS, environmental monitoring, weather, ice detectors, and ice buildup. For sure, meron kayo idea dyan. Engine monitoring, the pressure, temp, sensors, and vibration. Fuel and systems, yan, fuel flow, kung paano ba or gaano ba kabilis yung rate of consumption. Tapos pneuma, safety and performance enhancement, flight data recorders, yung mga black boxes natin, and proximity sensors. Now, ito yung pitot-static system. Kung na-discuss sa inyo ni Doc J, si Doc J nag-introduce sa amin sa pitot-static. Ito yung ginagamit nating instrument para ma-measure yung tatlong bagay. Una, airspeed indicator or airspeed. Pangalawa, rate of climb. Pangatlo ay altitude, syempre. Altitude ano. So, yung pitot-static system natin composed of two parts. Syempre, unang-una is pitot tubes. Yung mga nakausli dyan sa labas ng aircraft natin na parang wind vane. Ang tawag dyan is pitot tube. May tube kasi syempre, shape of tube siya. So, ang goal niyan is ma-measure yung incoming pressure or pressure ng incoming air velocity ng aircraft natin. Ng air pala natin rather. Incoming air natin. So, ang goal nito is ma-measure yung total pressure from the aircraft's forward motion and it's used to calculate airspeed. So, itong pitot tube is nakakonect sa airspeed lang ata. Hindi ko alam kung sa kung tanda ko airspeed yung pitot tube lang yung nakakonect sa airspeed o yung static port. Ang alam ko yung static port is sa BSI, sa altimeter, tsaka sa ASI. Tapos, ngayon, ang ating pitot tube, ulit ako dun, ginagamit natin yung tawag dito, yung total pressure sa labas, yung incoming. Tapos, kino-compute natin para malaman yung airspeed. Kasi sa pagbilis ng airspeed, sa pagtaas ng pressure dun sa unahan ng natin, di ba? Unahan ng aircraft. So, yun. And then yung pangalawa is yung static ports. Yung static port, from the name itself, static. So, ambient lang yung minemeasure niya. Kung bagay na dyan lang yan, i-measure lang yung nasa labas. So, it measures atmospheric pressure and provide data for altitude, and rate of climb. So, ito yung sinasabi ko na connected sa tatlo. Di ba ano yun? Yun ang sasabihin ko na. Meron tayong 6-pack sa instrument natin. Ito. Sorry, hindi bilog. Ang hopya eh. Yan. So, yung tatlong yan, yung nasa taas, ito ay airspeed indicator, ASI. Yung pangalawa ay vertical speed indicator, VSI. And yung pangatlo is yung altimeter. Ano po? Altimeter. So, itong tatlo na to, connected po yan sa tawag dito. Connected lahat yan sa static port. Pero itong ASI lang yung connected sa kabilang side. Try natin connect sa kabilang side. Connected sa pitot tube. So, bakit niya kailangan yung bakit kailangan niya yung static at saka yung incoming pressure, total pressure? Kasi magkaiba yung ma-measure mong airspeed compared dun sa static natin, static pressure compared dun sa total pressure, incoming pressure. Nakalimutan ko pala mag-income. So yung natin, yung ginagawa nung pitot tube natin, kino-compare niyo yung pressure from the incoming and yung static para ma-make sure or ma-compute or malaman rather yung total. Nag-open na pala yung video. Okay, pagkatapos ko mag-discuss dito. So, yun, ASI para malaman yung airspeed, yung forward speed natin. Now, yung VSI naman, from the name itself, vertical speed indicator. So kalimitan, na-measure yung rate of climb through this one, which is, ang unit is feet per minute. Kung familiar kayo dyan sa feet per minute. Yan yung ginagamit natin na measurement for rate of climb or vertical speed. For example, di ba, on every altitude, nagbabago yung pressure, nagba-vary yung pressure. For example, on lower altitude, mataas yung pressure. On higher altitude, mababa yung pressure. So, let's say, tumaas ka ng 1,000 feet. So, malaki yung pagbabago sa pressure nun. So, ang ginagawa ni static port, minemeasure niya yung difference doon. And then, once na ma-measure niya, i-compute niya yung rate of change in pressure and then translate it to rate of climb or change in vertical speed. So, mamaya meron tayong video about that. So, malalaman nyo paano siya gumagana para ma-visualize nyo. Then, altimeter yun. Pinaka-basic na use or parang role ni static port is to use or is to find the altitude ng isang spacecraft through pressure or ambient pressure measurement. So, alam niyo naman yan, different altitude have different pressure na ma-measure. So, depende so kung ano yung na-measure at the moment or the exact time. Ganun din yung ilalabas ni altimeter or mariread na altimeter. So, since gumana na yung video, share ko yung YouTube video. Hindi pala to. Ito sa raw satellite. Pero, unahin natin tong sa Pitochu. Hindi pala ulit nag-load. Ibayin. Yung isa lang yung load. Wait lang. Yan muna natin to. Panoodin muna natin yung sa raw satellite. Bago yung sa Pitosat.
Before we looked down from orbit,
Karinig naman po. May audio naman. Sige.
we could only observe what was in front of us. Storms arrived without warning. Forests vanished gradually, unnoticed until they were gone. We knew the planet was changing, but only in fragments, too slow, or too far to fully understand. Then, we put sensors in the sky and everything changed. At first, they watched the clouds, then the land. They gave us color images of Earth, captured from far above, revealing coastlines, croplands, and cities in new clarity. Each new satellite added more detail, more resolution, more insight. And now, we have stepped into the next chapter of Earth observation satellites. Hyperspectral satellites like those built by Pixel divide light into hundreds of narrow bands, capturing subtle variations invisible to the naked eye. Chemical fingerprints, crop stress, water quality, minerals, everything that the normal satellites can't see. Every satellite image undergoes a series of corrections and calibrations before it becomes actionable data. First, through our Aurora platform, a tasking order is placed specifying where, when, and what needs to be observed. The request is sent to our Firefly satellites in orbit, which adjust their schedules and prepare to capture exactly what's needed. Then a satellite passes over the location, scanning the location pixel by pixel. With each pass, it collects not just image data, but metadata, its position, angle, and the precise GPS coordinates of every pixel. The data is stored on board in encrypted binary form, waiting for a brief window to transmit to a ground station. When the connection opens, the satellite sends everything down in a burst. What arrives isn't an image, but a dense file of numbers. The first step is decryption, converting those raw values into something readable. Then begins a meticulous series of corrections. Radiometric correction adjusts for inconsistencies in sensor sensitivity, removing noise and calibrating brightness, so that each pixel reflects the true intensity of light on the ground. Geometric correction ensures spatial accuracy. Using models of the satellite's orbit and the Earth's shape, the image is realigned so that every point corresponds to the correct location on the planet. This process includes georeferencing and orthorectification. Atmospheric correction is where we account for the interference caused by the air itself, like water vapor and aerosols that distort what the satellite sees. For atmospheric correction, Pixel uses ISOFIT, a model developed by NASA. After all this, the dataset becomes ARD, Analysis Ready Data. It's delivered through Pixel's order desk, ready for scientists, analysts, and decision makers to apply. What looks like a simple color in a satellite image is actually much more in hyperspectral imagery. Each pixel here contains a detailed spectral fingerprint, a curve that shows how that surface reflects light across hundreds of wavelengths. But most real-world pixels are mixtures. As you can see, this is a mixed spectral signature, hinting at multiple materials, but not any pure signature. To unmix these pixels, we use a process called end-member analysis. The goal is to find the purest spectral signatures, the building blocks, that can be mixed in different proportions to recreate every pixel. One of the widely used methods for end-member extraction is vertex component analysis, or VCA. It finds the outermost points in spectral space, the most distinct curves, and treats them as end members. These form the foundation for understanding what materials are present in each scene. From there, using Aurora, we apply different types of models to make sense of the data. Supervised models are trained on labeled examples. We tell the model what water looks like, or what a healthy crop signature is, and it learns to detect the same patterns across new areas. Unsupervised models, on the other hand, don't use labels. They reveal patterns that weren't defined beforehand, help uncover the unexpected, from anomalies to emerging environmental risks. In many cases, we complement this with index-based approaches. Simple yet powerful formulas that combine select wavelengths to highlight specific surface properties. For example, vegetation indices like NDVI can reveal plant health and biomass. Water indices help isolate bodies of water or measure flooding, and others can detect burn scars and map urban change. All of this without writing a single line of code. And with Aurora Intelligence, analysis even becomes conversational, turning complex science into simple questions and answers. All of this together allows us to move from raw spectral data to tailored, decision-ready insights directly through Aurora. Every image that reaches us is the result of an invisible chain, from sunlight to satellite to signal to science, and a step forward in how we understand the Earth.
So yun, endorser pa tayo ng Aurora. Maganda kasi explanation nila about Earth observation, how they process those satellite images. Yun lang naman ay possible kung meron tayong mga camera tsaka optical sensors. So kaya very important and very usable, very malaki yung role ng sensor natin kasi kung wala tayong mga high spec na sensors, hindi magiging available yung study about Earth on the particular setting on space. So yun, sobrang halaga ng sensor sa natin, sa profession natin. Then ito naman yung sa pitot-static.
The pitot-static.
Kung paano siya nag-work.
The pitot-static system.
8 minutes pala. Wait, hanggang gitna lang.
The pitot-static system is connected to the airplane's altimeter, airspeed indicator, and the vertical speed indicator. These instruments tell the pilot how high they are, how fast they are going, and how fast they climb or descend. These are determined by measuring the pressure of the atmosphere. Before we go any further, let us become familiar with the atmosphere. If we take a column of air, starting at the ground, and traveling up all the way into space, you notice that the molecules of air at the Earth's surface are much more compacted together than the molecules up in space. The reason for this is gravity. Since air is matter, it has weight. So, all the air molecules at the top of the column are pushing down on the molecules below them, which compresses them. This compression results in a higher pressure at sea level compared to the pressure on top of a mountain. How much of a pressure change are we talking about? Well, if we say the atmosphere goes up to about 375 miles above the surface of the Earth, 50% of those air molecules would be found in the first 18,000 feet of the surface. So, because the pressure of the atmosphere decreases the higher up we go, our pedostatic instruments are able to measure that pressure and calculate our altitude and speed. The pedostatic system gathers its pressure information from two sources, the pitot tube and the static ports, hence the name pedostatic. The pitot tube is designed to measure the pressure of the air as the airplane flies through it. In most smaller aircraft, this tube is located under the wing so it can measure the flow of air without any interference. Sometimes aircraft manufacturers will use a pitot mast instead of a tube shape, but it still functions exactly the same way. On the backside of the tube, there is a drain hole, which allows any rain or water that is collected while flying to drain out and not go into the system. Finally, the pitot tube can also be heated. This is used to prevent ice from forming on the tube, which could potentially block the hole and prevent the system from functioning correctly. The counterpart of the pitot tube is the static port. The location of this port will vary with different aircraft designs, but should be in a location where it can measure the static pressure of the air, unaffected by the dynamic airflow around the airplane. On the Cessna 172, the static port is located on the left side of the forward fuselage. The pitot tube and static port openings are connected to tubes that join into the pedostatic instruments. The pressure inside the instruments match the pressure of the outside atmosphere. All three pedostatic instruments connect to the static port, but only the airspeed indicator connects to the pitot tube. Sounds simple, right? Let's discuss how each pedostatic instrument works. Altimeter. Perhaps the most basic of all pedostatic instruments is the altimeter, which displays the airplane's altitude. The instrument contains a set of aneroid wafers which expand and contract based on the pressure. The air inside the wafers is trapped, but the air in the rest of the case is able to change to match the pressure from the static port. As we increase altitude, the static pressure goes down. This means that the air inside the case will escape out the back and result in there being less air pressure in the case compared to the wafers. Because of this, the wafers will expand until both pressures are equal. Getting the wafers to result in an altitude readout is done through the series of gears, pinions, arms, and levers, also known as the mechanical linkages. These linkages will rotate.
Interrupt ko lang, no? So, kung makikita nyo, yung mga ano natin, altimeter, instrument natin before, sa mga older version, very analogous pa yung kanyang atake. No? Very old school pa yung atake niya. Kumbaga, nakasalalay pa siya sa displacement ng diaphragm. Pero ngayon, yung mga altimeter ngayon, yung mga modern, is nakadepende na sa mga sensors. Tapos, kina-convert nila yun into digital signals. So, ito naman yung ano din, sensor pa rin naman, pero more on the analogous type ng ano. At hindi siya electronic, no? Kumbaga, more on mechanical lang talaga siya. So, yun, tuloy tayo.
Take the hands on the face of the instrument and show the airplane's altitude. Now, when the airplane descends, the opposite happens. Descending to a lower altitude results in higher static pressure. Air from the static port will now enter the case of the instrument and squeeze the aneroid wafers until both of the case pressure and the wafer pressures are equalized. The mechanical linkages will then rotate the hands on the face to show a lower altitude. The face of the altimeter contains three hands, the 10,000 foot, 1,000 foot, and 100 foot hands. These hands move clockwise and counterclockwise to display the appropriate altitude. Most altimeters in smaller aircraft will only work up to around 20,000 feet, but those airplanes usually can't get that high anyway. Here's some examples of altitudes. 3,000 feet, 8,400 feet, 12,000 feet, 5,280 feet. This altimeter is actually called a sensitive altimeter, not because you have to hug it every once in a while, but because it can be adjusted for the current atmospheric pressure. Because the pressure at any given point on the Earth never stays the same, altimeters would always read incorrectly. Fortunately, pilots can correct this issue. Once the pilot knows the current atmospheric pressure, also known as the altimeter setting, all they have to do is rotate the dial on the lower left side of the instrument until the current pressure is selected in a little window on the face, called the Kollsman window. This then realigns the gears inside and the instrument reads accurately. The realignment is accomplished by rotating the entire inside mechanics of the instrument. Vertical speed indicator. Another instrument that uses only the information from the static port is the vertical speed indicator, more commonly called the VSI. The VSI measures the vertical speed of the aircraft in terms of feet per minute. This is accomplished by comparing the current pressure of the air with the pressure of the air from a few seconds ago. Inside the VSI is a diaphragm connected to some mechanical linkages that move the needles on the face of the instrument. The diaphragm has a direct connection to the static port, meaning that the pressure inside of it matches the current atmospheric pressure from the outside. The case of the instrument is also filled with static pressure, but the connection between the case and the static port is constricted by what is called a calibrated leak. This calibrated leak is nothing more than a tiny hole, which limits the rate at which the pressure of the case can change. When a plane climbs or descends, the diaphragm pressure will change instantly, but the case pressure changes slowly. This results in two different pressures. The difference in pressure allows the instrument to display the vertical speed. Be aware, however, that it takes a few seconds to read accurately, so anticipate a slight amount of lag. Here's an example of how it works. Say you have a Cessna flying at 3,000 feet. The air pressure in the diaphragm and the case are the same, so the VSI is reading 0 feet per minute. If the Cessna starts to climb, the air pressure in the diaphragm is decreasing, but the case pressure is decreasing more slowly. This results in the case having a higher air pressure than in the diaphragm. This higher air pressure will squeeze the diaphragm and make the VSI read a climb. Once the aircraft levels off again, the case pressure will finally equalize with the diaphragm, and then the VSI will show 0 again. Airspeed indicator. The airspeed indicator is the only pitot-static instrument that uses both input from the static port and the pitot tube. The pitot tube is used to measure what's called ram pressure. The faster the airplane travels, the greater the ram pressure is. The ram air entering the pitot tube gets sent to the airspeed indicator and, similar to before, goes into a diaphragm. The greater the pressure, the more the diaphragm expands, so the diaphragm will expand as the airspeed increases. Then, through mechanical linkages, the appropriate airspeed will display on the front of the instrument. But what about the static port, you ask? Well, remember how the pressure of the atmosphere changes with altitude? Well, if this wasn't taken into account, then the airspeed would indicate different speeds at different altitudes, even if the plane was actually going the same speed. To fix this, the static port connects and fills the case surrounding the diaphragm with static air. This will subtract out the static air pressure that the pitot tube captured and only allow for the dynamic pressure to be read on the instrument. This keeps the airspeed indicator reading the correct values no matter what the altitude of the airplane is. The face of the instrument displays color-coded speed ranges that the pilot should be aware of while they fly, to avoid exceeding any limitations of the aircraft. The green arc is for normal operations. The white arc is when you're allowed to extend the flaps. The yellow arc is limited to flight in smooth air only, and the red line indicates the maximum allowed speed.
Tripods pa talaga. Ay, tapos na pala. So yun, kung makita nyo, yung sa huling part, yung V-speeds, yung kung saan pwede extend yung flaps, maximum allowable speed, yung maaral din natin sa, sa aerodrive. So, dito pinakita paano ba natin ginagamit yung dalawang sensors natin into determining our altitude, climb rate, at saka yung airspeed. So, sa una nga, sa airspeed, ginagamit yung ram pressure na tinatawag or total pressure para ma-measure yung speed ng ating aircraft. But also, considering the pressure, outside pressure, kaya siya connected sa static port, na-explain naman sa video. Then, comparing them, yun, makuha na natin yung true airspeed. And then, afterwards, ano naman, rate of climbing nga. Meron tayong tinatawag na calibration tube kung saan nag-excrete siya ng particles, air particles, but a slower rate para lang, kunwari, kapag tumaas na, mag-equalize yung ano natin or magkaroon equilibrium yung pressure natin sa loob ng diaphragm. And then, panghuli naman ay sa altimeter, no? Pinakasimple sa lahat. Pagtaas ng altitude sa pagbaba ng pressure. So, lahat ng yun ay commonly noon sa mga older aircraft, such as Cessna, is puro mechanical linkages lang yung ginagamit nila. So, they have to be very precise sa paggawa nung mga instruments before. Kasi, kung di sila precise sa paggawa, mamamali sila sa measurement ng altitude, rate of climb, tsaka airspeed. So, imagine nyo, kahit sa simpleng pagbabago lang ng pressure, dapat kalkulado yung bawat teeth ng gear dun sa linkages natin para ma-make sure na tama yung movement nung nung arrow natin dun sa sa UI, sa interface natin. So, yun lang para sa ating tatlong dalawa pala sa pitot-static instruments natin. So, proceed tayo sa other aircraft sensors. So, bukod sa sa pitot-static, meron din tayong tinatawag na attitude and heading reference system or AHRS. Kung makita sa screen, ito yung nasa gitna ng mga piloto kung saan pwede nilang determine yung attitude. Yun yung sinasabi ko before na meron silang horizon na tinatawag. Attitude, tsaka yung kung sila yung nagpi-pitch up, pitch down, etc. And naging siya possible because we have several accelerometers and gyro din sa loob ng aircraft. Kasi kung wala tayong way para ma-determine yung current orientation ng aircraft natin. Katulad nga nung IMU kanina. Actually, meron din iba na merong IMU. So, yun. Dito usually ginagamit sa AHRS. And then, radar altimeter. Hindi lang naman kasi, ito na yung mga digital ha. Hindi lang naman kasi pressure ang pwede natin gamitin para ma-measure yung altitude ng isang aeroplano, isang spacecraft. Aircraft rather. So, yung sa radar altimeter, same principle dun sa radar natin na pag-usapan last discussion is nagpo-produce siya rather ng waves, radio waves. And then yun nga, kung meron tayong output, may input, meron din tayong baliktad. Kung meron tayong output, meron tayong natatanggap or input. So based doon sa natanggap ng transmitter versus receiver, based doon sa total transit time, dinidivide natin yun sa 2, then doon natin pwede i-calculate yung distance ng ng aircraft dun sa sa surface. Though hindi siya ganun ka-accurate based dun sa sea level. Kumbaga, meron kasing type ng altitude na mine-measure from the sea level and meron din na from land level or surface lang. So, dito, ang mine-measure lang is, I think, so to call as elevation, kung nagkakamali. So, elevation versus altitude. Now, ginagamit siya sa mga land-based lang na, I mean, malapit lang sa land na mga tawag dito, land na aircraft. Although gumagana din naman siya sa water. Hindi ko lang alam kung gano'n siya ka-effective compared to land. Kasi water can actually propagate waves. So, hindi ko alam kung kaya niya ring i-reflect back. Pero baka naman, oo. Baka naman, hindi naman 100% but majority ng wave is pwede rin nilang i-reflect. So, yun, pwede rin yun. And then, ano pa ba? Fuel flow, no? So, na natin yan before, na-discuss dun sa aking experience before. Ginamit namin fuel flow to calculate the mass flow rate nung pinaka-fuel natin. So, from that, measure natin yung rate of consumption ng fuel natin or how efficient it is. Then, afterwards, meron tayong AOA sensor, angle of attack. Very, very important sa pagme-measure ng stall angle or stall warning. Kasi meron tayong, kung natatandaan nyo, diniscuss natin before yung ano tawag doon? Left polar grab ba tawag doon? Left grab. Basta yung AOA versus left na graph. Ito. Kumbaga ito yung AOA or angle of attack. To. Tapos ito yung lift. So pagtaas ng angle of attack, syempre tataas din yung lift natin up until point such angle of attack na bababa na siya afterwards. So kapag nag-sustain pa tayo ng angle of attack, bababa na ng bababa yung aircraft natin. So that's why mahalaga na meron tayong gantong type ng sensor para warningan tayo if ever nalalampas tayo sa stall angle. Then, ano pa ba? Cabin pressure, very important sa mga passenger airlines. Passenger aircraft, so sa loob, kailangan nilang i-maintain yung pressure, nasabi ko na naman before. Nag-work siya by getting the information sa inside and then afterwards pinapadala niya yung signal dun sa pump kung saan pwedeng mag-pump ng mas madami or mas konti, depende sa internal pressure ng cabin natin kung siya ay mababa or mataas na. Then infrared naman, mostly sa mga military, kasi pwede rin nating i-measure yung thermal signature ng isang bagay through infrared. So infrared, nasa baba lang yan. So alam niyo naman, infrared rays ay ginagamit din siya for sensing the proximity, no, ng mga ano natin. And also tracking, night vision, kasi pag gabi, syempre wala namang light. So ano tayo, magde-depend tayo sa infrared. Then ito yung pinaka magandang I think system na naging application ng radar, which is the TCAS, the Traffic Collision Avoidance System. So nagwo-work siya by maintaining or parang continuously sensoring or parang measuring the proximity sa taas at baba ng aircraft, no? So meron yan magkabila, taas at baba. Dinedetect yan kung merong mga incoming na aircraft, tapos tsaka lang siya magkakaroon ng warning kapag sobrang lapit na or merong chance na magkaroon ng collision. So TCAS is very matagal na naman siyang ina-employ before pa. So I know na meron kayong idea kahit konti about TCAS. So yun, dahil din siya sa sensor. So to prevent mid-air collisions. May video na naman. Alam ko umay na kayo sa video, pero mamaya yan, panghuli. So we have also the TAWS or terrain awareness. So kung kanina sa aircraft tayo nagpo-focus, ito naman sa terrain. So para rin siyang altimeter, yung radar altimeter, but ang minemeasure natin dito or minamap natin dito is yung mismong terrain or topography nung surface na pinaglilipatan natin. So para alam natin kunwari, meron ditong may mountain. Kasi minsan pag may mountain na malapit, pwede kang ma-subject to turbulence ng air. Kasi hindi ko tanda yung tawag, pero may air na napoproduce kapag malapit ka sa bundok. Yun yung parang pinaka delikado, lalong-lalo't kapag nalipad ka sa low altitude low level altitudes. So kailangan ng TAWS para doon. Then weather radar, syempre for weather, for measuring the precipitation, turbulence, thunderstorm. Now the question is, since nasa loob siya, kailangan ba naka-expose yung radar natin? Well, not exactly, kasi hindi naman niya need ng outside outside energy. But meron siyang, ang alam ko, meron siyang mga slots doon or mga butas kung saan doon siya nagkakaroon ng gathering ng data, no? So kaya siya ganyan, pero nakatago kasi syempre, for example, pag malakas yung thunderstorm, ang i-expose mo yan sa ulan or sa thunderstorm, edi nasira yan. Baka mangyari pa, hindi mo ma-measure yung yung weather natin. So kailangan may enclosure pa rin yan. Pero not to the point na naka-block 100% yung i-measure niya. Kailangan meron pa ding way para maka-gather siya ng information. Now, ito yung video ng TAWS. The TAWS. Anong oras na ba? Abot pa kaya? Makli lang naman to. Aghang. Wait lang, naghang. Ayan, okay na. Wait lang, share ko ulit.
progress, notify the team.
3 minutes lang naman. Bear with me.
Reduced Vertical Separation Minima, or RVSM, requires aircraft flying in the same airspace to be separated by 1,000 feet. Precision altimeters and ground-based secondary surveillance radars have made it possible to fly aircraft in such close proximity safely. However, as increasing demand continues to congest the airspace, the risk of mid-air collision has never been greater. A simple miscommunication or a lapse in concentration is enough to send two aircraft on a collision course. To avert the calamity, one of the most advanced systems is installed on the aircraft: the Traffic Collision Avoidance System. The TCAS system has a computer in the aircraft avionics compartment and two antennas. The top antenna scans the area above the aircraft, and the bottom antenna scans the area below. The TCAS computer collects several data from the aircraft systems and creates a three-dimensional area of protected airspace around the aircraft. The system has a wide scanning range and can detect several aircraft in the vicinity, but only gives warning alerts when a traffic is a potential collision threat. Let's see how the system determines that. The onboard TCAS computer sends interrogation signal to the traffic aircraft. The TCAS computer of the traffic aircraft responds with identification code and altitude. The onboard TCAS computer locates the position of the traffic aircraft by tracking the direction of the response signal and calculating the distance from the traffic by measuring the time taken between interrogation and response. Change in altitude and position of the traffic over time helps the TCAS computer to calculate the airspeed, vertical speed, and heading of the traffic aircraft. Using data of both the aircraft, the TCAS computer solves three important questions. Number 1, what is the closest point of approach? CPA is the point where the two aircraft will meet, having the minimum distance between them. Number 2 is the traffic and intruder. That is, will the traffic aircraft path interfere with the protected airspace at the time of CPA? If yes, then the most important question, how much time is left to meet at the closest point? If both the aircraft continue on the same flight path, with 45 seconds to go, the TCAS issues a traffic advisory.
Traffic.
And the traffic is displayed on the navigation display. Amber dot indicates the aircraft, and the +05 indicates the traffic is 500 feet above. In traffic advisory, there are no maneuvering instructions. It just draws the attention of the flight crew to an incoming aircraft. With 25 seconds to go, TCAS warning changes to resolution advisory. The amber indications turn red. Instruction is given in the cockpit to maneuver the aircraft.
Descend.
Red lines on the flight display indicate the areas to avoid flying in. The TCAS computer on the traffic aircraft is coordinated to give an opposite direction command.
Clear up conflict.
When it comes to possible mid-air collision, TCAS may be the last line of defense, but a very effective one. Thanks for watching.
Okay, so doon in-explain kung paano gumagana yung TCAS and ano ba yung purpose. Siyempre, for collision avoidance. So, I think that's all for today para sa ating discussion for aircraft, spacecraft and aircraft sensor. Meron tayo na-discuss na I think tig 10 each about sa spacecraft saka aircraft sensor. So, pag-aralan nyo yung difference between those 20. I know, medyo madami, pero madali lang naman yung mga definition niya. So, yun lang. Do you have any questions or clarifications about our sensors? May hindi malinaw. Baka may gustong itanong. Wala naman. Hindi send a heart rocks naman po if walang question. Kung wala, kindly open your cameras po para sa ating last picture. Para tayo makapag-dismiss na. Inabot pala siya ng 1 hour 50 minutes, sorry. Napatagal. So, yan. Nakas naman, nasa isla. Okay, pa naman po ng camera natin.